Welcome to 5 after midnight. You know that feeling when you're being watched? It's better if you don't turn around. 1.
A friend and I got kidnapped while hitchhiking for charity. My university runs an event called Jailbreak every year, where teams have 36 hours to get as far away from campus as possible without spending any money. Most teams manage to get into Europe and stuff, and me and my friend were hoping for the same. We got picked up on the M10 by an Albanian guy who was in convoy, following his Lithuanian friend who had just bought an old Merc. He basically told us that he would take us down the M10 and then around London on the M25 and then start to head down the M20 towards Dover and drop us off somewhere along there. For most of the journey, he was very unsettling. He said that he was a physics teacher, and I could tell he was lying because I'm a physics undergrad. In fact, the whole time, he seemed to be just telling us conversational lies. To make matters worse, my friend who was sitting on the back seat fell asleep, and while she was dozing, he used that as an excuse to lock the car doors. Suddenly, I realized something wasn't right when he came off the M25 and actually started driving into North London, something which wasn't in the plan at all. I started to get pretty scared at this point. When I asked him why we were driving into London and not staying on the M25, he kept saying, "My friend, he knows a shortcut. We follow him." For non-UK people, driving through London city traffic definitely isn't shorter than driving around the M25. And even when I got out a map of London and asked him to point to where we were going, he was still being very vague. I asked him if he could drop us off at the nearest petrol station, and he kept saying, no, we're nearly there and stuff. Eventually, I told him they were tracking our phones and that I had already texted someone else his number plate and my friend's number plate, all of which was a lie. At which point he phoned his friend, spoke in another language, and then begrudgingly let us off at the next petrol station. That was the scariest experience of my life.
2.
I was about 12 at the time, babysitting my little sister who was around 8. My parents were out for the evening, at the church setting up for some event as I recall. I remember it was around 8 or 9 at night, plenty dark out. My sister and I were playing in the unfinished part of the basement, and in the Midwest, that meant that the part of the basement was mostly underground with just the storm windows at ground level. This is when shit got weird. I hear the garage door open from upstairs, and 2 distinct pairs of footsteps walk into the house. They did not belong to my parents. Being familiar with not only the sound of my parents, but also the sounds that the floorboards made creaking above our heads, I knew people were in the house. I quickly shushed my sister, looking up, trying to figure out what to do. The closest phone was upstairs, where the footsteps were. I knew better than to call out. 2 small girls home alone. My only concern was getting my sister out to safety. The footsteps tread back and forth. I assumed they were turning out the lights that we had left on upstairs. I could hear 2 men's voices, not enough to make out words, but I distinctly heard 2 men. As soon as my sister saw that I was panicked, she began to freak out, crying and whatnot. The footsteps immediately stopped. I slapped my hand around my sister's mouth and picked her up on one arm and ran up and out of the unfinished part of the basement to get to the bottom level sliding glass door. We had to pass the stairs that led from the upper level, where the men were, to the basement where we were. After a moment of silence, I heard booming footsteps. I could only assume that they heard my sister and were headed toward us. Running with every bit of I'm gonna die adrenaline, I heard the thundering sounds of them coming down the stairs behind us, just as I got to the sliding glass door. I threw it open, shoved my sister out, and screamed for her to run for help, and then I tripped out soon after her. I could feel them right behind me. I had clearly heard them damn near falling down the stairs, huge booming footsteps. I fully expected to get grabbed. My sister, now screaming bloody murder, had attracted the attention of our neighbors. I turned around. No one was there. They were right behind me. I heard them. I knew that they were right there. There was nowhere they could have gone. Needless to say, the cops were called. My parents rushed home. No signs of entry at all. All the upstairs doors were locked. Garage door was still shut. Nothing was missing, nothing out of place. I still have no idea what happened that day. Definitely one of the more terrifying experiences of my life.
3.
When I was 16 years old, on Christmas vacation, I hitchhiked from Chicago to Los Angeles. I made it there in 57 hours, and it took me 3 weeks to get back. On the way back, just outside Amarillo, Texas, I was out on the road at about 10 p.m. It was very cold. A black Cadillac traveling westbound turned around, pulled up to me, and stopped. The passenger side window opened, and the driver offered me a ride. We talked for a while, and eventually the driver told me that he was an entertainer. In this nightclub, his act was known as the African Queen. As a relatively innocent 16-year-old, I didn't really appreciate what that meant. After traveling a short distance, the old African Queen propositioned me and asked me to spend the night with him. I declined. He persisted. He asked again and again. Finally, he stopped the car. I tried to open the door, but there was no handle on the door. I could not get out. He put his hand on my leg, smiled, and said he wanted to please me. I got pissed off. I said, in no uncertain terms, "If you don't let me out of this fucking car, I will break your goddamn neck." He replied, "Well, you don't have to get angry." I opened the window, reached out the door, opened the door, got out, and he pulled away. I saw his black Cadillac take the next exit, cross over the highway, and continue back westbound.
4.
When I was in Cub Scouts as a little kid, I was doing the canned food drive that we did every year. We were just delivering the bags with the notes saying we'll be back in a week for the food and stuff. I walked up to one house and the door was already open. I looked inside to see if I could get the bag to somebody, and I saw 2 men dressed in black stuffing things from the house hurriedly into garbage bags and muttering to themselves. They didn't see me. I stopped, turned around, and left. I just told the adult I was with that nobody was home.
5.
I was hitchhiking alone when I was 14 years old. I was very tiny, very stick-thin, and very unable to defend myself, and I'm a female. This guy picks me up. He's going to drive me home in exchange for directions to some road. And as we get to an intersection where it was a red light, so he had to stop. We needed to turn right, so I said to him, "Make a right here." And he smiles and tells me, "No, you're coming with me." I said, "No, I need to get out here." He smiles this creepy as shit smile at me and again shakes his head, no. And I realize I may have just gotten myself into a situation I really didn't want to be in. I go to open the door, no handle. I unroll the window, open the door from the outside, and do a jump and roll from the now moving car, almost getting hit by one behind us. I was a dumb little shit. I didn't give up hitchhiking alone from my shady neighborhood until I was able to get a car several years later. Hyundais still give me the creeps.